Well, far as I can remember, I've been associated with the church. And my name is Earl Claggett, and I live in Ashton, Maryland. Well, my family has been involved back to my grandmother's time. They've been involved with the church. But I think the church has been involved with most of the families in this community. I think the church has affected the family, and the families have affected the church. In the very beginning, I think a lot of people came to the church closest to them because they didn't have good transportation.
Okay, good, all right.
My name is Gwendolyn Bell, and I've lived in and around Sandy Spring all of my life. As far as I can count back, my great-grandparents were on both sides from this area. My grandparents were married in this church, as were my parents, as was I, and we just celebrated a 50th anniversary in this church. So we've been fully connected since before I was born. And the church has been a very big part of our lives for generations. And I'm hoping it will continue to be.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, I was born in Arlington, Virginia, and I didn't stay there, too long. But after that, I came back to Norwood Road, where my grandfather and all owned property there. So we always had a home right there on Norwood Road. And I joined this church. Let's see. I guess I was grown person when I joined, because I used to go to the church from Spencerville, Maryland, around Baptist Church. That's where I went when I was a child. So I joined here under the leadership of Reverend, what was his name? I think we had two ministers with the same name.
Brooks?
Brooks, yes, Reverend Brooks. So that's about it.
How old were you when you joined, and when was that?
Well, I was grown. I was a grown woman, and but back then I can't remember. I was young, but I don't know the age number. I should have looked that up though.
And you said you came where your grandfather had land.
Yes.
Were any of your ancestors involved?
My grandfather was Charles C. Hill, and the Quakers raised him because his mother died when he was 5 years old, and the Quakers took him when he was 9 and raised him and kept him there with them. And when he became a man, they said that they asked him one question: would you like to buy a home, some property? And he said, "Oh, sure, I'm ready to buy." And so anyway, he bought 150 acres, which is on Norwood Road, and I'm still there on Norwood Road. And so let's see, what else was it? Well, let's see, my brother and my two brothers and them and my sister, they have property on Norwood Road, but the rest of them have sold theirs. And I've had a good life. We used to have horse shows there, and if I thought about it, I'd borrow a ribbon.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
So anyway, that's what.
May I ask how old you are?
I'll be 84 years old, November 1st. Okay.
Oh, and yes, you didn't say your name.
My name is Margaret Hill. I was born in Arlington, Virginia, but I grew up on Norwood Road in Silver Spring, and I still live there.
Great, thank you. Okay, and Mr. Snowden.
My name is Thomas E. Snowden, Jr. Very few people know me as that. They always call me Babe. But anyway, my family, the Hill family, has been members of this church way before I was born. And they've been here all, from 97 years I've been here. That's how long I've been here, 96. And like I said, I never associate in my younger days with Sharp Street. I become a member of Sharp Street in '66. I joined Sharp Street. But other times, I was born in Howard County. I went to school in elementary school in a little town near Holland, Maryland. That's my elementary school. And also in Brighton Elementary. And I come here, didn't come here in this side of Maryland or near Sandy Spring. I used to always visit Sandy Spring because that's where my family was. But I didn't come here to Sandy Spring until 1939. We moved from Brighton to Sandy Spring. And it's right down there where I was telling you. That's where we lived. Farm down there called Harewood Farm. And that's where I stayed. Then, from then on, I was all over. I started driving on the road trucks when I was 18 years old. Went all over the country. Oh. When I say country, I'm not exactly the country, but all over the different parts, states. Right. And up until now, and like I say, I didn't even go to associate with, didn't go to Sunday school here. Okay. But I used to visit here a lot.
Right. But as an adult, you had joined the church and joined the community.
And in the '66, I joined Sharp Street.
Okay. Okay. But your family is a long
My family been here all their life.
Okay. Who can tell me how Sharp Street got its start? Who started it? Why was it started? That sort of thing.
I can tell you the story as I understand it. It seems that the Quakers who helped establish Sandy Spring saw to it that the black community received a parcel of land to build a church on. It was deeded to the black community to be used as a church, and I believe that was in 1822. And the church was named after Sharp Street in Baltimore because, as history has it, that was a progressive church. It was a church of freed blacks, and I guess we wanted to associate with that kind of image. And the church has been here ever since. This is a second building of the church. The original one was burned in, I believe, early 1920s. And this is a second church that was built. Mm-hmm. And it's served the community since then. Mm-hmm.
it's thanks to the Quakers, but it's your ancestors who really got it going. What was their goal?
I'm not sure I know what their specific goal was, but I'm sure it was to maintain a place for worship for the community. And it also served as a place for education for the community. And it served as a place for social gathering for the community. And looking back over some of my mother's papers, I saw where the congregation and the community, whether they were members of the church or not, came here for all of those things. For all of those things. It was the only church in this immediate community at that time.
Right. Can you recall some early memories of coming either to the school or the Sunday school?
It used to be a school here. The Quakers started a school, elementary school, industrial school for the black, and they went into school and taught the black. Now, I have my mother's certificate where she graduated from that school. And after that, it wasn't, the county didn't have any high school for blacks, so she had to go to Washington to go to Armstrong. I have heard, what I can tell you is about what my parents and grandparents and older people have told me about the church. Some of the people that went to the school, I've talked to. They're all gone now, but I didn't hear anything about the Quakers teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. But my mother talked about how they taught her how to sew. And Mr. Bob Hill, the building contractor, I heard him talk about how he started off in the carpenter shop. And I heard Mr. James Offord, better known as Duty, talk about how he played stickball at the school. Now, I don't know what stickball is or how you play it, but I seemed like they went into the woods and got a stick like a golf club and hit this ball. Now, my first cousin, Allison Claggett, told me how he went to school in a hall, Oddfellows Hall, after school burned down. I heard that the school was so close to the church that you could stick your hand out the window and stick your hand out the window of the school and touch the church. The school caught on fire and burned down, and so did the church. Now, when this church was rebuilt, the date is in the cornerstone of this church on the left-hand side as you come in. I don't remember what date that was, but I think it was 1928. That's all I think I'd answer that question.
And they didn't rebuild the school.
They didn't rebuild the school. The county took over and built a school for the black on Brook Road. And that was a little 3-room school, elementary school. And that's where I went to school. I'm 84.
Okay, thank you. Other memories of coming, early memories of Sharp Street?
Well, we always came to Sunday school. We didn't have a choice whether we came to Sunday school or church. We came to Sunday school and we came to church. And there was always something to do. In the summer, we would have bus trips to the beach. We would go to the camp meetings. We look forward to that. We would look forward to going to the beach because that was a once-a-year event, and it was down at the beach known as either Carl's or Sparrows Beach. They were the only black beaches in the area at the time. And as a matter of fact, I was in that area yesterday. There's one person who still has property along that beach, and it just brought back a lot of memories. It really did. A lot of effort was put into things for the children to do during the summer. And mainly, I guess it was because there weren't a lot of other options. And the church served as a means of keeping children engaged and busy and occupied. And I think it worked, you know. But the Sunday school was important. We would have little plays, we would have pageants, all of those things. One of the things that we had almost every year was the Tom Thumb weddings, where the children would participate, sell tickets. Whoever sold the most tickets would be the bride or the groom, and they would dress up and have quite a pageant, and everybody was excited about that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Other, did you
Well,
want to say?
I didn't come here until I joined church. But when I was a child, my cousins and I went to around a Baptist church, to Sunday school and to church. So that's been quite a, I don't remember what year, I know we were children then. I joined, but when I joined church, I joined South Street here.
Right, and you were a young adult.
Yes.
What drew you here? Why did you come?
Well, I don't know. A lot of my relatives were here, and so when I decided to join, I just joined here with my family.
They used to have a lot of things, as Miss Bell is saying here. I can remember this church was one of the outstanding church, and I think it still is. And they used to have and the people, the members was together. They was really together. When they want to give a fair, anything, they get together and do it. And they have, used to have sell food and dinners. And the church members would prepare all the dinners, you know. Some family bake cakes better than anybody and cook chicken better than, well, they're the ones was automatically signed up to do the job. And one thing it's about Sharp Street that I can remember, I got around every now and then. They always had a day, a typical Sunday. They had Sunday school. That was a big day for the children. They had Mother's Day, which was a big day. Everybody come out, all families come out to see the big hats and the pretty hats. Men's Day, and it was just a big, one large family. And homecoming was another day here. Even up now, and before though, back in a few years, people would leave here, and I've known people come from Pittsburgh, because I had an uncle that lived in Pittsburgh, and he never missed homecoming.
What made it so special?
Well, just coming home, meeting the family, coming back, you know, and of course you're going to have that good meal that day, see. And that's one of the things that made it special. And to see their families and friends. Yes, South Street have always been, from what I can learn and what I know, outstanding church.
Could I add?
Yes, please.
I think it's about 5 big days a year at the church. The Odd Fellows used to have a day. The Maryland Aid Society used to have a day. The Maryland Aid Society was started by a lady named Miss Addie Hood, and the society aided anybody in the church who needs some aid. We had the picnic and parade once a year. And let's see, what else? Homecoming. And like you said, Men's Day and Women's Day.
Did you have Children's Day as well?
Pardon me?
Children's Day as well?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, we did.
yeah. But the church have changed a lot over the years. Most of the people who used to come to church were related to each other. And I knew the families. But today, the people who come to church are not related, and I don't know the families or where they come from. Well, now, it used to be a graveyard here at this church.
Oh.
And the graveyard, I heard, was the oldest African-American graveyard in Montgomery County. I have been away from home for a while. I don't remember when they moved the graveyard, but I heard that they moved the graveyard. And the parking lot is over top where the graveyard used to be. I used to come out here with my grandfather helping decorate his mother's grave. We didn't always have a blacktop out there, parking lot. And when we come to church on a rainy Sunday morning, after church, a lot of people would get their Sunday clothes muddy, pushing people out of the mud. But now we have a blacktop parking lot.
And what happened to the graves?
Well, I heard they moved the graves. They moved the graves. There's a lot of controversy about where the grave stones went, and we used to have some they were oak trees.
Oak trees.
And there was a lot of controversy about they cutting those trees down when they put it in the parking lot. But
I think a lot of the graves were moved to the Mutual Cemetery, which is around on Brook Road. I don't remember when that cemetery was started, but that's where the majority of the graves went.
I hear that this is not just a place to come on a Sunday for 2 hours. It's a place you've given your lives to. Why was that so important to your families and now to you?
Back during that time, there were not as many options as there are now. So people's attentions are spread out more. The church was a focal point of the community on so many, many levels, you know. It just served so many functions for families, for individuals. And today you could go almost anywhere and do almost anything, but that was not the way it was early on. And everything centered around the church.
When you say fewer choices, I can imagine that to mean, well, we couldn't travel as easily, but it was also, the society at the time was more restrictive. Is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
It was all because of the way things were at that time. And when I say there weren't many other options, there were no movie theaters to go to. There were times when someone would come to the church and bring a movie to show, and of course everybody would come because that was the only opportunity to see a movie, either here or they would do it at the elementary school. And I suppose we learned after a while that there was another way, that there were other options, that there were other things out there available that we had not had access to. And I'm afraid that when the congregation, not just this congregation, but the community in general, when those things became more accessible, people went out to experience those things, and that meant sometimes that there weren't as many people participating in some of the social activities of the church, even though the church still had its role, and there was a core that continued to come and still does. There was just more exposure, and people experienced more things.
Right.
Well, one reason I think why we had those big days, like the picnic, because it wasn't a lot of places that the African Americans could go during that time. I think Miss Mag Hall started the picnic, and it was a fundraising affair. And the way they raised the money was that they'd have certain young women run for be queen of the picnic. And the one who raised the most money would be the queen. Well, like she was saying, there wasn't movies and things like that for the African Americans to go to. So those days, people look forward to go to them, to come up. You know, some of the members are laughing, but some of the members of it, what went on, you know, was very interesting.
Okay. How do you think you all developed a sense of community responsibility? What I mean by that is, where did that come from? You all seem very committed to the church and the things that go on here.
Well, I tell you, in my opinion, you know, most everybody in Sandy Spring, not now, but was kin. That was one thing about why Sandy Spring was such an outstanding place. Everybody was kin, cousins. You know, we used to go to Frederick from Brighton and Sandy Spring to dances. So I was asked one time, why do y'all go way up to Frederick to dance? So the reason I did give them, to get away from your cousins. We wanted to see some girls, and we get away from our cousins. And it was a funny thing. I did meet a girl up in Frederick at the time. You know what her name was? Snowden. But yes, we had, but it's like I say, it's a Sharp Street. It's been together ever since I've been knowing it, and since I've been living in Sharp Street, ever since 38, I've moved down here, as I said. And they always been together. What I've been knowing, I've known us to have sometime, I've known a couple of times, you know, all churches have their ups and downs. But I know my mother she was on some type of board in this church. It was 3 of them. Bertha Bishop, which is my first cousin. Cousin Edna, which is my first cousin, Thomas. And they were the 3 musketeers.
It was.
And those ladies kept things straight. They kept things going. And not saying it caused my mother, but they kept Sharp Street going. And they even, when Sharp Street got into maybe a little mystery or something, a little, debate about something, they made sure it was straightened out. I'll have to tell you this joke. I remember one time that they got in a confusion about their choir gowns. So they had 2 sets of gowns. And this group wanted one gown, the other group wanted the other. See, my mother was a seamstress. So they couldn't get together on it. So what they did, they got my mother to make the gowns. She made them, brought them out here. Then you know what it did? Church didn't have to pay for them. The choir members paid for them themselves. So you can't beat me, And that's the type of people they were. They didn't get mad with each other. And that's something else about this church. You didn't see nobody leaving this church in them older days, get mad with somebody, get mad with the preacher, or and leave church, go to another church. They stuck together. That's one thing, just like a big family. And just like Brother William just said, today is a different ball game here. I don't know. I know most of the people here since I've been in the church. But it's not like back then, the longer days, in the older days. Sharp Street was Sharp Street. I can say that. I guess because my family was there. Both sides of my family was here. Snowden's was here, and the Hills. And that was one thing that I loved about Sharp Street, because my family been here all their life. And I think it's a wonderful place.
I am getting that. Yes, go ahead.
We're talking about the people being related. I know one Sunday, a lady came to church, and she sat in the seat, and another lady came and sat beside her. The third lady came in, and the 2 ladies sitting side by side, one started talking about the third lady. She didn't know she was talking about her sister.
Okay.
She was talking about the lady's sister. Then one Sunday, I remember one lady came to church that I hadn't seen in church before. But I knew the lady was very comical. And after church, I heard that the lady said, "Them people out there at Sharp Street all look like they came out the woods." Somebody asked her why. She said, "They all had on furs."
Yeah, that did happen.
Did any particular minister have a profound impact on your life or your family's life? And if so, who and why?
Well, there was a minister named Reverend Dockett. He didn't have no car, he walked. And he got up a play. And the play was so good it went from church to church. And that's one minister I know. But I've said under 19 ministers. Back to Reverend Yearwood's time.
Anybody
Yeah.
else want to mention?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a book here that my grandfather had. And in this book is where the minister of this church gave my grandfather permission to solicit money to build Good Hope Church down in Spencerville back in 1912. The first person, he got receipts from everybody that gave him money. The first person gave him 50 cents. But 50 cents was 50 cents in those days.
It was.
He just called a name. Reverend Dockett was one of the outstanding old men. And you could go to him for any question, any type of question you want. I know that used to be another thing at this church. When you join church on here on a Sunday, you'd be shouting all over this church. Shouting. And the people are hugging you and picking you up. It was a wonderful thing to join church here. And because people be hugging you and grabbing you, that's what they did to me. But Reverend Dock and my uncle joined church here one Sunday. And he was a ball player. And back in them days, it was like sin to play ball. Christians didn't go to ball games. So they always had dinner. After somebody joined church, after you joined church, you'd go to that family's house, and some of the congregation would go, and some of the, and they would have dinner. So my uncle, Reverend Dockett, was sitting there, and my uncle said, he was a ball player at the time, and he was a Hill, his name was Bob Hill. And he was sitting there and said, Reverend? He thought the Reverend was going to say one thing. So he said, Reverend, you know they're playing ball down in Norbeck. And I sure would like to be down there. Wonder would God mind if I go down there? Reverend said to him, say, Brother Hill, it's just much sin sitting here thinking about it.
And then just going.
Than being down there. And he was that type of pastor, and just keep right on going, you know what I mean? And I loved him because he was uptight, good preacher. And of course we have one here now too, At this present time, we have a good preacher. Wonderful. But that's the thing, that's one thing I like. But a lot of preachers was here was good, but he was one of the outstanding men in my praise.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to think back as to the first one I remembered, and I can't remember who that was. But one in particular I remember used to take the kids, we would have church in the park. And that was big fun. I've always loved outdoors, so that to me was special. And I've got to look back and find out exactly who that was, because I was a little bit. But I remember that. I didn't know until he came, I didn't know that it was possible to have church in the park. I thought it always had to be right here. So that was like an awakening for me. Mm-hmm.
Good. And what role did music play for you all? I'm thinking.
Whoa,
that was
wonderful. That's where all the people used to sing here. My uncle sang here. It was a Hopkins.
But let me say this. What did it mean to you to sit and...
Well, I love singing, just like I say. I love singing, good hymns and good spirituals. I love it. And it means I love it. I get to crying sometime, and I even bring tears out my eyes when I get good people can sing good. But
Someone else about
Well,
singing?
when I was a child, the people used to sing hymns and anthems in the church. They didn't sing many, they didn't sing the music like they sing today. It was mostly spirituals and hymns. Very little.
Gospel.
Huh?
Gospel. Gospel.
Gospels, yeah. They didn't sing many of them back then, but they sing a lot of that now.
One of my fondest memories, as far as music is concerned, was my grandfather. He played a harmonica religiously. I mean, he had certain favorite songs, and to this day, when I hear any of those songs, it just brings it all back to me. He was self-taught, but he was a very spiritual man. He didn't say a whole lot, but when he did speak, everybody listened because they thought if he opened his mouth to say something, he had something to say. And it was worth listening to, whether he was speaking it or playing the harmonica. His favorite was Sweet Hour of Prayer, and hearing that song just brings it all back to me. But my mother sang in the choir. There was just so much musical talent in this church. Like he said, the Hill family, the Lee family, and it came in families, it came in groups. You didn't have just one person from a family. You would have a whole quartet or almost a whole choir with magnificent just gifts from God, and they used them effectively. I mean, part of the reason for coming to church was to get that musical fill, you know. And I still love that. I still do.
Yeah, he used to come and sit for the second seat down there and play that Sweet Hour of Prayer.
In the seat that I sit in.
Yeah.
I just can't make myself sit anyplace else because he sat there, my dad sat there, and I just sit there too. You know?
Now, my grandfather was a great bass songster. He used to sing in the choir. And when he passed, Mr. Robert Johnson had a bass saxophone, and he used to play it in the choir.
I have a picture of that. I'll share with you.
My grandfather used to sing in a quartet called the Burn Court Quartet. He used to sing for the Quakers.
Yeah, music was just a big part. It has always been a big part of the African American community. When you couldn't do anything else, you could entertain yourself, you could uplift yourself and each other through the music, and you still do. Mm-hmm.
Did the Quakers in Sandy Spring and in the area, did they affect your outlook on life or your religion? Did they have any influence?
Not mine.
My grandfather, Charles T. Hill, he was raised by the Quakers. His mother died when he was 9 years old, and they took him and raised him. And when he became a man, they said, "Charlie, I've got 150 acres. I will sell you for $50 an acre." So that's down Norwood Road, and I live on 2 acres of that 150.
So what
So-
does that mean to you to know
It
that?
means just the man was a wonderful man, and I'm very. I think the Quakers were very good to him. They took him and raised him, and they just gave him a start.
Which was rare.
Yeah, right.
I believe, excuse me, before you finish.
Yeah.
My father, as a child, his family worked for a Quaker family, and a lot of I have a difficult time explaining the type of person my father was. He was very much a self-educated person. He had very high expectations of himself and everybody around him. And he learned a lot of his life skills and the things that were of value to him from working in Quaker homes. And he taught us a lot of those things, how to value some of the finer things.
Right.
They were plain people, but they had very high standards. And he absorbed a lot of those standards, and he transferred them, imparted them to us in a lot of ways. I mean, to the point where on Sundays we had to set our table fully. I mean, down to the bread and butter plates and the little bread and butter knife. And everything had to be done just so. And his thought was he wanted us to know how we could live, we could appreciate and recognize the finer things and feel comfortable with that. And we could also appreciate and recognize the common things and feel comfortable with that. And I felt that that was a lesson that he learned and transferred to us, and I very much appreciate it because there's been so many times when it has come in very, very handy for me. So that was the effect that I felt from the Quaker influence.
Well, you finished?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was Quaker territory. The Quakers had farms, and on the farms they had tenant houses. They call them tenant houses where the black would live on the farm. They wouldn't pay them much money, but they took care of all their utilities. So the black couldn't leave them. The black was good to the Quakers, and the Quakers was good to the blacks. My grandfather worked for a family of Quakers, and there was a lady who owned the property where I live today, who owned that property, and she sold that property to my grandfather next to the Quakers to spite the Quakers. The Quakers turned around and loaned him money to pay for it. And one of the Quakers' daughters, her father died, came to my house one day. I wasn't home, and she told my wife what happened. That her father loaned my grandfather money to pay for the property. I remember after my grandfather died that my aunt, my mother went down to finish paying for the money that the Quakers loaned it to my father. I think it was $500. That was the balance. The Quakers had farms, and they used to raise vegetables, and they sent them down to Washington to the market in a horse and wagon, and they'd come back, put the horses up at Miss Kay's toll house. And then the next day they'd come on back home.
I'm going to move on to another question, if that's all right. I didn't want to cut you off, but were there other African American churches nearby, and were there a relationship between the churches?
Well, I do know that at one point this church was part of a charge, meaning that the minister served this church and the Centennial Church in Brighton, and possibly another church as well. So they interacted on a regular basis. But even churches that were not in this charge, we would have camp meetings, and all of the churches would come together during the summer and share in worship services, sharing food, sharing songs. That was a big time. Very, very big time. And the other part about it, during that time, because there was only one black high school in the county, you got to know everybody in the county practically. So when you came together for camp meeting, there was always somebody there that you knew. And it just made for a great time, you know.
Well, the Quakers got rid of their slaves early because it was against their religion. Like Gwendolyn just said, we used to have camp meeting 3 Sundays every summer. And everybody would see people you hadn't seen for a long time. Now the Quakers taught the black a lot. I remember that the Quakers had ponds on their farms. And in the wintertime, they'd cut the ice. And they would dig a deep hole in the ground and put straw in it and put that ice down in it. Those people didn't have no Frigidaires. They had ice boxes. And they would have ice way up in the summer. And they would dig a deep hole in the ground, put straw down it, put a straw top on it, and just have an opening for you put a ladder down there and go get the ice. You used to have to put your milk down in the spring or in the well, your watermelon down in the spring or in the well to keep you cool.
Now you brought up school. What importance did schooling hold for your families?
And I know that it was for us. I can remember having to walk. I went to the same elementary school that my parents went to, the 3-room old-fashioned school on Brick Road. And there was never any question whether or not you were going. It didn't matter if it was snowing up to here.
Right.
You had to go. And to walk
That's right.
to get there. But there was no option. There was no choice. And I can remember being very upset because I had the farthest to walk because we were the farthest from the school. And I used to stop by other children's homes on the way. You know, you gather and go. And 9 times out of 10, if it was raining, they wouldn't go. They would say, well, we're not going today because it's raining. But I didn't have that option. I mean, it was just understood, you go to school. And that was just well instilled. There was just no option. I didn't understand necessarily why at the time, but it was just part of the way you do things. Now I understand why. Didn't like it sometimes because it was cold.
Well, I think our families want us to have a good life. Mm-hmm. So we needed education to have a good life.
Right.
And they wanted us to get educated.
Well, I went to Spencerville Elementary School, and I lived on Norwood Road, where I live now, and I walked from Norwood Road to Spencerville School, and my uncle, he would always run me back because everybody else would be home to bed, and I'm going across the field going to school. And I would cry, I would cry, because I wanted to go to school. But school wasn't open because of weather. But I've always loved going to school. My mother didn't have money to send my brother and I both to college, so she sent him. But I did go to business school in Washington, D.C. It had some business courses. But I did all right for myself, yeah.
We all didn't always have good buses. So we would bus to school. Sometimes the buses would break down, and some children had to walk to elementary school from Old Baltimore Road down to Brook Road. That's a long ways. The Arkwoods had to walk down that far.
Do you have memories of the families in the church banding together to get things done, either a project or helping somebody?
I can remember my mom. This was not necessarily part of the church, but just the way she was. I could come home at any time and find any number of children. She would gather up some children. There were some children who lived a little ways from us, and she knew of them, and they would have a hard time. She would bring them home. I'd come home, and there'd be 3 or 4 children in the bathtub. She'd be giving them a bath, getting clothes for them, just taking care of them. And that's just part of what she felt was needed, so she did it. Whether it was as part of the church or just something she needed to do, because that's the way she was raised, you know. You just help. You do what's needed.
Right. And what do you remember about the Oddfellows Hall next door?
Well, the Oddfellows Hall back in those days, was used as a dance hall. See, I think the Oddfellows used to have meetings in that hall in later years. And her father was the head of the Oddfellows then, and I think he had that hall open. I think they used to have meetings in it.
They did.
But when I remember back in I was in my teens, they used to have dances. That's the only thing I knew they had there.
Me too.
The dances.
They had, well, as we talked about earlier, when this church burned, they used it as the school and the church until those buildings were replaced. But their main function, it was a benevolent society. And my dad was, I don't remember the name, they had long names, Grand so-and-so and so-and-so. And he was the head of this lodge, and he eventually became head of the lodges worldwide, and did a lot of traveling because of that. But it was a benevolent society, and the purpose was for people communities, individuals, to band together to serve members of the community who had need. They would raise funds. It was almost like the first insurance company for blacks. They would pay dues, and if you were a member and something happened, then they would be there to help you out. And it started, I'm not sure exactly when it started, the whole organization. It goes way, way back. But it was a big part of this community for the dances, for the social aspects, for just lots of things. Lots of things happened. And there were halls like that, built on that same structure all around. I've been to several different areas where they have buildings that look exactly like that, and they were used for that same purpose. You know, there were 2 Oddfellow organizations. This one And the one among the blacks was called the Grand United Order of Odd Fellows. But there was a companion group in the white community that was known as the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. And I believe they served a similar function, but they did it separately. But this is the one that served this community.
My mother belonged to the social club that used to have meetings in the hall. The club was named Mercedes Club. And everybody in that club, it was all female club, and everybody in the club had a nickname. I think my mother's nickname was Fritz.
Fritz?
Fritz. That's all I can remember about it.
What do you think your ancestors would say, looking at the legacy they've built? What would that mean to them?
Well,
That's a good question.
some of the things that are happening today, I think if they see it, they want to go back where they came from.
Okay.
Well, things are very different from the way they started. There's no question about that. And I'm not sure which direction things are moving in at this point. You know, I don't know that the level of commitment for increase is the same as it was then, because the level of desperation doesn't exist now. People take much more for granted, I believe. And I think we need to perhaps step up to the plate a little bit more to make sure that the legacy that was left to us will continue. There's a lot to be done.
Anyone else have something to add to that? Because I'm going to also ask, what does this church, this place, not just the church, but the people and the memories you have here, what is that, what place does that hold in your heart?
I have a very difficult time thinking about living anyplace else because I've always been here. And I just have a very hard time thinking about being someplace else.
Me too.
And so what has it meant to you over the years to have this long history with you?
Well, I never thought I would be telling you the history of the church or anything, but I don't know.
Sometimes it's hard to be able to put in words something that's so important to you, and I understand that.
Yes.
Before we close, is there anything that you think I need to make sure that we say about the Sharp Street community, something that we haven't talked about, we might have missed?
I think we had covered a whole lot.
Well, I think maybe Sand Spring community got ahead of the other communities because of the Quakers taught them. This is just the idea. I don't know if that's true or not.
I agree with you.
The Quakers were very good people. They took my grandfather and raised him and sold him the property that they had, that we have on Norwood Road. And I am, when they say Quakers, I smile because they have been very, very good to my family.
What do you think Sharp Street means to people today?
A few years ago, well, I guess it's more than a few years ago, the trustees of the church got an old school bus, and I was chairman of the trustees at the time, and we fixed that old school bus up, got tags, insurance, And we used to go around early on Sunday morning. They get out of bed early Sunday morning, go around and pick up the children and bring them to Sunday school. Back in that time, we had 3 classes. Had the small children, the intermediate, and the adult classes. A few years ago, we started doing the same thing with the van. Mrs. Stahl gets up early on Sunday mornings to go around and pick the children up and bring them to school, and they have a good children program now. They always have a children's moment during the service now. I think that's a good thing that they continue.
I personally love the children's moment because I learn as much from that as I do from the rest of the service. But we don't have as many children now as we used to, but the ones that we have seem very committed. We still have very good educational programs for them. This week they're going to be taking a trip on the Underground Railroad. So there's still a lot going on for them. We just don't have quite as many, but those who come seem to really love to come. So that makes me feel like there's hope for continuation, and that's a good feeling. I think the ancestors would be happy.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciate your taking the time. You took more time than I said it would take, so I apologize. But thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right.